are listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I am here to bring you an interview with the band Ice Age, and the progressive metal band who I basically just reviewed their album not long ago. It is Album of the Month for February 2023. And I was really excited because this interview, and I'm not going to sit here and talk too long before the interview itself. This interview was great simply because of the fact that I had all four band members basically on the show. And what I loved about that is the fact that I've never done an interview with four band members. I mean, I had three band members on a radio interview once, and it was really hard to kind of keep track of who was who. But you know, when you do something on video, it's a little bit different. And so it was a lot of fun getting to pick the brains of these guys. And man, their new album is phenomenal. Folks, again, I cannot emphasize enough. If you like progressive metal, progressive rock, definitely pre-order it. If you are a fan of the band when they had their first two albums out in the late 90s, early 2000s, I highly recommend it as well. And it's being sold at the Laser's Edge. So lasercd.com, I believe. So anyhow, with that said, here is the interview with myself and all four members of the progressive metal band Ice Age. Well, I obviously I've listened to the new album. Some of you have probably seen the review on it. And,
yes, thank you so much for the kind words. I mean,
well, so I have to ask you guys. I have to ask you guys this because, you know, obviously I've been doing the show 25 years, and I do remember you guys from back in the day as you watched in the video. So I have to ask, man, what you guys kind of disappeared, right? And I always wondered what happened to this band. In fact, I was talking about this with a friend of mine who also loved the first two records you did. And, you know, you have a new album out, which I really think kind of picked up where the last one left off. And so where have you guys been all this time? I guess that's my first question.
Doug, you want to take that?
Sure. And anyone jump in and you know, elaborate further. But what I would say is it's pretty well known that we experimented with trying a rebranding with a different name and a different style. And because it didn't seem like what we wanted to try musically still fit with Ice Age as a name. Mm-hmm. So we tried that out for a while, and we went as far as we could with it. And, you know, it just, you know, my opinion, you know, as I'm the new guy, the 22 years later, still the new guy, but I just feel that it wasn't authentic to who Ice Age is in the band's musical identity. Mm-hmm. And that what you have now is exactly that. And that's why, you know, we really loved your comments about the fact that in your review, you mentioned that you feel this new album picks up exactly where Liberation left off. Mm-hmm. That's the greatest thing to hear, because I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we got, you know, after Liberation, we did some shows, and we got a little disillusioned because I think we were hoping for more like support, more of a push, right, from the label. And you know, so like Doug said, I mean, we decided, you know, we always prided ourselves on our songwriting ability as well as our, you know, quote unquote chops. So we wanted to make the songs more concise and more, you know, quote unquote accessible, mm-hmm. and focus a little bit less on the prog side of things, which we did. You know, but like I said, I mean, I think that stemmed from realizing that there was only so far that we could go right, with the label that we were on and the support we were getting from them. You know, there were a lot of great bands on that label. Mm-hmm. Who should have had more recognition, you know. So that was kind of the genesis of why we decided to go in that direction.
Right. You know, it was a weird time too, because you know, I remember I started the show in 98, and a year later your debut album came out, and you know, there was no social media. There, you know, the internet was kind of, you know, I mean, I was running websites for some pretty prominent metal bands at the time, and it was just a different time. You know, there was no high-speed internet, there was no downloading, you know, when that first record came out. So it was a little bit, for a band like yourselves, it was a little bit harder to get the word out. So I completely understand that. My question for you is, because I know you had changed the name, you guys went under a different band name for some other music, and obviously starting out with these first couple Ice Age albums, and then you decided, hey, we're going to focus on and make the songs more concise. Did it feel unnatural to try to write something different than what you were doing? Because you were going from this prog stuff that you really love doing to something different. Or was it something you wanted to try out because you really wanted to write that kind of music?
Well, I think for us, it was really the same thing, right? I mean, our goal as a band, and it's been there since Josh and I got together about 35 years ago. We want to write good music and good songs. And sometimes when you write a song takes you in different directions. And when you're collaborating with different musicians like Josh and I and Doug and everybody and Hal, everybody has ideas, and those ideas take you in different directions. But at the end of the day, our goal is always the same. Like, the song has to be a really good song, it has to be concise, the lyrics have to be thoughtful and well put together, the melodies have to be really, really good. Some people have to connect to the song and us playing it. And then the direction was not that much different. It was that we were actually still writing songs, but we were just not going into those avenues that you normally would as a prog band. We weren't exploring those. So it was really still the same people writing, but we were always like, we'll put a break on when we're about to delve into the area, and we'll think about it and say, well, maybe instead of doing this, maybe we should do that and something. That's how we ended up in that. So it's not that far different. I don't know if anybody has that was my point of view of it, really.
No, I agree 100%. I think it was, we consciously tried to, like Jim said, I mean, the song is always the focus at the end of the day. And in a prog environment, you always get tempted to go for the instrumental parts and the off times and all that kind of stuff. And we wanted to see if we could, like I said, make it more concise and not necessarily go off on those tangents and make the songs more, quote unquote, accessible for a wider audience. I mean, at the end of the day, again, I totally agree with Jim. I think the core of the band was still there. The material wasn't really that different. We just didn't go off on a lot of tangents, I think. And it was less prog in that regard.
Yeah. When like I said, when I was talking about this newest album, kind of picking up where the, Liberation had left off, it's interesting when you talk about the label, back then, because, when I would deal with Magna Carta, it was kind of like, it was a lot of labels like that had a lot of these bands, a lot of prog stuff. I mean, that music really wasn't highly regarded that much, at least in the late 90s. I mean, Dream Theater had, some hits, but, a lot of the prog stuff really didn't, in my opinion, didn't really start to get recognized and, until like years later. I almost felt like you guys were, if you guys had come out like 4 or 5 years later, I think the albums and the support would have been a lot better for you. That's my opinion. Just by knowing in doing the show what kind of bands were coming out and what labels were doing, and this kind of music started picking up a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think maybe we were a little impatient at the time. We should have stuck with what we were doing because we knew it was good, but when you're a fairly young band and you get this opportunity to get the music out there, which is rare, and I mean, it's a lot more common now because, as you say, the internet, but back then it was still a pretty rare thing. And, we thought we had something sort of unique to offer, and we really wanted to get it to a wider audience. But I think you're right. I think maybe 5 years after we put out the last album, the prog metal thing and prog in general was becoming much more, I mean, it's never going to be mainstream, but it was becoming much more popular and known. Correct.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I would just see bands that were kind of scraping by. And then I don't remember, I mean, there's a few groups out there I can refer to, but then all of a sudden I'm looking and they're on they went from some small label to like a bigger label, bigger record label out there. And these bands started sort of picking up steam, so here's a question for you. what made you guys decide to put this all back together and write and record this album? I mean, what was it that inspired you to finally do that after all this time?
Hal. I'll take it.
Had a barbecue.
Yeah, had a barbecue. Yeah. Actually, we're talking about it for a while. I guess, you know what? We miss playing together and writing. It always felt like we had so much more to say and to write, and it felt like we were cut short. It always felt that way. I mean, Doug and I had gone on and done other projects and played with other musicians and other bands and did that for a while, but it always felt like Ice Age was our band. That was the go-to band for us. That's where we were able to be the most creative, be able to say the most musically that we had, and be able to just be as original as possible with no boundaries. And we always missed that. I missed it. And talking with everybody else, it was just a matter of the time involved and getting together. And like they said before, it was just a matter of getting together at my barbecue, talking about it, jamming out for a little while, and realizing at that time that, there was still something very special there. And I don't think none of us were ready to just give it up. So we just decided to go on and give it a shot. And from there on in, it was just like, we have to do this. We have no choice. It was evident. It was very evident that we needed to continue.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's always been a chemistry there that we've never been able to duplicate when playing with other people. It's just always special. And, that's something creatively that I think we all missed. And I don't know, I think we all in the back of our minds as time was going on knew that we would start writing again at some point. But that barbecue was kind of the genesis. We were in Hal's living room and we were kind of jamming. We were going, yeah, okay, well,
yeah, it's time.
Clearly this has to happen because, it's just the chemistry there. We're just lucky to have each other in that regard.
Yeah, it is something special, I think, that you very rarely do you find like four people that you can put together in a room and throughout like almost like 30 years, right? Come up with ideas. And when I come up with an idea, Josh will play something that fits perfectly what I come up with and vice versa. And then Hal will play something that fits perfectly. That just doesn't happen often. We played with tons of other musicians, and it's always a struggle when you put four people in the room, and there's always like arguments. Oh, I don't like that. I don't like this. This never happens with us in the 30 years. Like I remember after the barbecue, we went to like a rehearsal studio just to play. And the first riff that I played and everybody started playing, we're like, oh, wow, this is really good. And everybody's face lit up and everybody started getting excited. And we're like, okay, we just got to like keep going at this.
Yeah.
That's very unique, right?
That's the beauty of the creative process. I mean, and we just bounce those ideas off each other and it always comes together,
Right. Well,
and the beauty of that whole situation where there were no timelines. There was no pressure over a label or a deadline to have this album done or a song done. We just did it at our own pace, and it was perfect. It was perfect. But it was just amazing how everything just fell into place after so many years, and it wasn't rushed. Like I said, it was no deadline, so it was just a nice, beautiful experience once again, and really enjoyed playing again, which I missed.
Well, the thing is. And you did bring up a very important point. It was actually the next thing I was going to say, but no matter how much people like each other, if you're musicians, no matter how much you like each other, no matter how much you guys, some people may dislike each other, you cannot put money on musical chemistry with another person. It just doesn't, you can't buy that. And, that's why like sometimes you'll see bands with like all these musicians that, maybe that are like famous or, are well known. And sometimes those bands don't pan out because they don't have that chemistry together. And I think that is the biggest part of why the new album you put out feels like it picked up where the last one left off, because you have that. And that's the beauty of it. 22 years later, I mean, you can go into a room with people that you may not have even jammed with for 20 years. And it's like, you never stopped. And that's the exact feeling I have on this record.
Well, thanks so much for saying that. Yeah.
That was pretty much the experience we had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it really was. It's pretty amazing that it happened that way. But that's
Yeah.
that's
And I
there.
think you can tell
undeniable.
because of the music too. You can tell it shows off through the music. Like you don't have to like talk to each other to see that. Like it follows through the music. You can tell it's written from, that shows through.
Yeah, and
Sorry, Hal.
and the great thing is that we didn't have any preconceived notions about like what kind of music it should be or what, we weren't calculated. Like, we said that when we changed the name and we were trying to do something different, that was sort of a very calculated thing. This wasn't. This was just let's be us and play what comes out. And like you said, it was just back to the albums and that sort of feel and that vibe again. And it was just
sure, absolutely. So when you started, when this came together, you started recording it. When did the interest generate? From the Laser's Edge. I mean, they've been around. I mean, I was ordering stuff from them like 20 some years ago. And when did the interest start? Because you guys are playing a pretty big show as well. And when did the interest come about? After you started recording this record.
So I can speak to that. We were in what I would call a demo stage with some of the material, and this was early days of lockdown. So we'll say, close to the middle of 2020, we put together a digital press kit and started reaching out to our contacts. And Ken Golden from Laser's Edge Sensory was someone that I reached out to because I was aware of him, but I wasn't also aware of the history that he had with the band, that he actually had got them onto Nearfest, I believe, right?
Yep. Yeah. Nearfest 99.
So
yeah.
That's when Aaron was in the band. So it was just kind of an amazing bit of serendipity to, at such a dark time it was happening in the world, to reach out and then have Ken respond and be instantly excited and have such a great memory of how he felt about the band and enthusiasm for what we were doing. He got it right away. Like, this is classic Ice Age. Keep going. And that's what we did.
Yeah, and again, I had, I understand where he's coming from because, I was somebody that, Magna Carta would always send me like, just once they knew I was into many of the bands that were on that label, they would always send me stuff. I mean, I would get like these random envelopes full of like CDs, and I would open them up and start listening to them randomly. I think that's how I ended up listening to the first album, and then obviously the second one. And it was like that late 90s, early 2000s, and that's really was my dawn of really getting into more progressive stuff than what I was normally listening to. And it was like that label and Inside Out Music, man. Those were like the two labels that if you wanted any kind of prog rock or progressive, metal or whatever, you had to go. I mean, most of the bands were there at the time, and that's how I found you. And so now, it was a struggle for you to really get the word out back in the day. Now, how is that different for you now? I mean, now that this record is coming out and people know it's out there, were there a lot of people coming out of the woodwork that you didn't know about that were like all excited about this? And maybe talk about what it's like for you now promoting this album as opposed to, when the first two came out.
Hal, you can talk to that. I mean, you're.
Oh yeah, man, absolutely. Early on, we kind of touched base on how we didn't have the benefit of the internet. For us, our internet was the perpetual motion board. And the guys around there spreading the word because of our live show or our demo tape that was circulating at the time.
That was the biggie.
That was tough. That was, it was kind of like hit the shows and kind of like make a name for yourself, and hopefully they like it enough to tell a friend about it. This time around, Facebook, the Instagrams, the YouTube channels, the Twitter, whatever what may have you. It's been a great help. We've reached out to so many people that either remember the band from 20 plus years ago or have never heard of the band, but are being finally introduced to us. through this new video, through past videos posted on YouTube, or fans that have just mentioned us in a review or what have you. And it's been a huge benefit this time around. So much easier to reach so many more people.
Yeah.
I wish we did have this 20 plus years ago. Things might have been a lot different, but it's just where we're at, and we're dealing with it. And it's just the way today is. That's the way it is. Technology is happening, and we're taking advantage of it. And thankfully, we're getting a very, very good response about it. So, it is what it is, and we're just flowing with it.
Yeah, back when your first album came out, the first ever MP3 I downloaded from a record label in Europe took 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, if you think about it. So when I ended up getting the promo for the album, I downloaded it in like 45 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a much different thing. You can send press kits out. You're not mailing stuff out.
Sure.
So it obviously is a lot different. So let's talk about the direction that the album took. I feel that this album is a little bit heavier as far as the music goes than the previous album. And was that just what came out? Was that your intention? And let's talk about some of the songs on this record as well.
Yeah. That was not intentional. This is what came out.
Yeah.
I mean, inherently, my musical influences are heavy bands from the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So inherently, I mean, I gravitate in writing things of that nature, right? And then everybody puts their personality into it, and then at the end of the day, the song comes out. So sometimes we don't have any conditions. We don't go in and say, let's write a ballad. It is what it is. We start writing and it comes out. And that's why you see, I think in this album, you'll see a great variety between really heavy stuff and a lot more melodic stuff, and a lot more different places that we go to that normally you wouldn't go to. Some in the previous albums, the first album was heavier, the second album was not as heavy. This one is not. This is just like we are just touching in every possible area.
Sure.
Yeah, and it is completely authentic. I mean, like Jim said, we didn't pre-plan like it's got to be heavy, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. I mean, it's just Jim always shows up to the rehearsals with these crazy great parts and these riffs, and we just go nuts from there. I mean, and that chemistry always, we're able to put our personality into it, and it just works. In general, the heavier songs will start with a riff from Jim. Some of the not so heavy songs, if you want to say To Say Goodbye, Part 5, for example, like that was started on piano, and some of the songs are a mix. But I think generally also because of the production this time around, I think that the heaviness comes through better in some ways, especially than on Liberation.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we always had that response from people when they saw us live. They always thought that we were a much heavier band live than we were on record. And that's just the way it came across. We were always that heavy. We just maybe it wasn't captured as much on tape. But the production this time is great. They all were great. It's just again, the songwriting this time around is just these guys would come in, send me some clips of what they were writing. I would pull my hair out, going nuts trying to figure out what they were trying to write. And then at the end of the day, it was just this piece of music that came out of nowhere. And again, like they mentioned, it's completely authentic, and sometimes it was heavy, sometimes it wasn't. It's just a roll of the dice, whatever was what we were feeling at that particular moment, what came out.
Yeah, what I did notice though is that some of these songs, lyrically are continuations of songs on previous records, as from the lyrical perspective. And I guess I got a two-part question for you. The first thing is, are the three albums you've put out, including this one that's coming out, is there like a concept, and are they related, or are just the songs like To Say Goodbye, Perpetual Child, are those just kind of stories you continued just for those songs only?
They're not defined concepts like with telling a story from beginning, middle, end. Mm-hmm. But the themes that the lyrics touch on in those two series are similar. Like the To Say Goodbye series it's all about various kinds of loss, whether it's a loss of a family member, or, a child. Perpetual Child is about that. It's written from two very different perspectives. The first one was written when I was much younger, obviously, and now 20 years later, there's still a continuity with the theme. It's life as you get older. You're still trying to let go of some of that baggage you had when you were young, and you're still informed by what you learned when you were young, but you get wiser as you go. But in some sense, I think we all feel like that inner child is always in there trying to get out.
Right.
And it's a lot easier sometimes to look at the world from that perspective than it is from the perspective of a jaded, experienced adult, So those songs are about that sort of that conflict.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool that you sort of continued on with that whole concept thing going on. Now,
and I should add that with something like Perpetual Child, like what Jim was coming up with riff wise evoked the original Perpetual Child musically also. So that led me to think, all right, well, how can we bring this feel into the old Perpetual Child and make it a continuum? The musically, especially with that song, when I heard what Jim was writing, it seemed obvious to me after a little while that it could be a continuation.
Yeah. And I think that the intro riff to that song, and I know musicians will probably pick that up if they can pick that up. It's a variation of the intro riff of Perpetual Child. It's still in 7/8 and it's still in the same key, but it's a variation, and Hal is approaching it the same way. I mean, we came up with most of the other song early on, and then once that idea that came along, we're like, oh, maybe we should just try and come up with something that unites the two. And there's themes and motifs throughout it that could remind you of the first one and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, that was, believe it or not, when I listened to the album, that was the first thing I noticed, because when I heard it, I felt a little bit of a familiarity here. I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds a little bit familiar. And then I went back and I listened to the original Perpetual Child, and then I realized what you had done there. I thought that was kind of a little clever thing that you kind of snuck in there. I'll allude to what I said in the video. Every time you listen to it, doesn't matter what prog band it is, there's something different that you'll end up hearing in the record. And believe it or not, that was the first thing that I actually noticed, because I didn't I didn't look at the track titles. I started listening to the album. I wasn't paying attention to song titles at the time. And then I heard that and I had to stop it. Let me hear that again. And I had to go back. I had to go back to the first album. And then I went and replayed the first track on the first album. Then I was like, okay, I see what these guys did here.
And that's kind of what we were trying to accomplish too, is that we've been gone for more than 20 years. So we want to remind the fans that we know what came before, and we want to almost thank people for staying on the journey and waiting for something new. And, we wanted to make a nod to those old songs to connect with the fans, because it's been a while.
Absolutely. And, the thing is, the only obstacle, I think that one of the biggest obstacles that you have to deal with now, see, back then there were fewer bands, right? I mean, I did a video on this, and I had another video where we talked about a lot of the bad things, obstacles and stuff that are going on in the music business itself. But one of the things that, even though it was harder to reach people back then, there were fewer bands. I'm not, this morning, for example, I actually talked about this. I think it might've been on my Facebook page, where I said I had 47,000 emails.
I heard, yeah,
last year. So if you want to laugh at something, my old Macintosh Power PC that I had back in the late 90s, I had to go in there to actually find a file for something. And I went and looked at my old email client in there, and I went and just took a look. I only had a couple thousand emails, so there are so many more bands sending stuff out, so it's a little harder to stand out. The only reason, because all these publicists, I get like today alone, I had 200 emails just today. I don't think I even got to like 50 of them. But when I saw the subject in there that you guys were around, I had to like click. I immediately clicked on it and then realized it was the same band. So I was like, man, I go, and then like simultaneously I had somebody message me, man, Ice Age is back. And I'm like, it's kind of funny you say that, because I just emailed the publicist back to try to get these guys on the show and actually, check the album out. So, that's probably the biggest obstacle you have now is now standing out from this sea of bands. Because for me, again, 10 CDs sent to me, I like 5 of them. 50 albums sent to me now, I like 5 of them. If you kind of get where I'm going with that, it's so saturated with stuff because almost anybody can record stuff now. Sure. It's a lot easier. I mean, you can go and buy something for $300 that has basic effects in it, and try to record a record. But what happens is everybody's using the same almost inaudible tuning, the same drum triggers, the same. A lot of bands will do that, and they sound the same, and you got to sift through that to find the actual people that are really doing something unique. So I guess that's your biggest obstacle. I'll be honest with you. But you are playing a big show. Let's talk about that. Yeah. I mean, you're playing Prog Power. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And talk about playing that, because I mean, for this kind of music, I mean, here in the States, that is the place to play, especially for a band like you guys.
Yeah, it's exciting. I don't know. Doug and Hal can take this one. I mean, I think it'd be great. And I think we'll have a great time. And I think we get to play a big show like that and promote the music. That's awesome.
Yeah.
For me, when I play music and I write music, there's 2 different parts of music, right? You're either a composer or you're a performer. And then rock bands do a little bit of both, right? Some rock bands write music and then perform. And for me, writing music is what I crave 24/7, right? It's the creative part of it. Performing live is more of it's a different medium that I don't enjoy as much as I do writing music. I have a good time playing live because playing with these guys. It's just amazing. But the stress of playing live, driving and flying and going to the shows and going through sound checks and sleeping in hotel rooms and all that stuff. That's stuff that I don't miss.
And
unfortunately, but yeah, it's great.
It's a little intimidating for us also because this music is really complicated and we have to make sure that the chops are 100%. We're all perfectionists, so we're really psyched and we're honored to be invited, and but we're still getting over the initial feelings of being where it's a little overwhelming. We got to get our chops together. We got to rehearse. We got to get our shit together because it's a big opportunity, So
absolutely. I mean, that's the crowd you really want to showcase this stuff to, because those individuals that the people that they have a lot of diehard people that go to that festival literally every year. There's people that have been going to it for 20 some years, but they are into this kind of music a lot, and you'll be surprised. Have you guys ever been there? Have you been to that show?
No, I've never been.
No, it's a completely different world, gentlemen. I'm going to tell you right now. It's you are the type of music that these people seek out, and I think you're going to find it's going to be a very good show for you to go down there, showcase the band, and really network, get to know people. It's really going to help you guys out. Getting the word out, in my opinion, and I was really excited to see that you were invited down there to play Prog Power down there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's because it's really tough, man. Besides getting the word out there, things aren't cheap anymore. I mean, transportation isn't cheap, and bands are facing. Creatives always get the shaft. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
The musicians they were the last.
Inevitable.
I mean, they were the last people to get to go back to work. Musicians that are playing for a living, the last people to be able to go to work. I remember one musician telling me that a record deal was basically 80 pages of you getting screwed. At least back in the day, that's pretty much what it was. A little bit. The business model
That's
works
what it was.
a little different now, but it's I'm a creative myself. I can tell you that you deal with people that devalue this kind of stuff. I mean, just the way society works, and for you guys to get that opportunity, I'm really happy for you.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
appreciate it.
We're psyched. It's a big deal. And it's very gratifying to know, like you said earlier, that people have come out of the woodwork like, oh my God, the band is back. And people are so excited. I don't think we realize the extent of that existed,
Mm-hmm.
So it really makes us want to go out and perform for people because. Yeah.
And that's mainly too because of the way the music business was back then and the lack of communication we had with the label back then. I mean, Magna Carta was a good label, but there was not like a constant communication with the label, right? So we didn't know how many fans really liked. It was very hard for fans to get to us, right? Mm-hmm. Without even us knowing. I mean, there was fans out there that we didn't know we had, and finally now, we're getting some of those validations 20 years later.
Yeah. Are the first two albums, are they still available? Are they out there? And if not, do you plan on maybe reissuing them?
They are out there.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so they're out there. They could still be bought as physical CDs, and also Magna Carta put out a 2-on-1. I mean, it's two separate CDs, but they released it as a set as well. And obviously, with all the streaming part of the universe, your Spotify, your Apple Music, it's all out there.
Okay.
And so it's very accessible for people to still get it that way. And the one thing I wanted to say about Prog Power is, and just the idea of us playing live. So there's so many bands that that you've got you, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this as doing what you do. You've got those project bands. There are some labels out there that are notorious for just putting something together, and it's more of a project, and it's but it's not legitimized by playing live. And so that what really needs to happen for us as part of this full circle process of a new chapter of Ice Age is, okay, here's the music, here's a new album, and now here's the band playing live to legitimize that and to make it and to give. There's a lot of people that never had a chance to see us live in that kind of setting, like a festival that, as you said, is the medieval times of Prague. So
to tell you how crazy it is. So I looked at my phone. I in the time we've done this interview, in this 40 minutes, I've had 27 emails sent to me just in that period of time. That's how crazy it gets. So let's talk about the album in general, like the album cover. You have a knight sitting in a chair on a beach. So I think that's a little bit interesting. So what's the concept and the theme behind that? Because that was a little bit interesting to see, and obviously the album covers on the first two albums definitely were nothing like that.
Well, I mean, all the credit for the concept goes to Bjorn from Killustrations, who did that. I mean, we gave him a good portion of the songs and most of the lyrics. He listened to it all. He sort of processed it, and that is 100% on him. I mean, I think we were all just, our jaws hit the floor when he sent us the first rendering. I mean, he really sort of internalized. I think it's a perfect image to encapsulate a lot of what's going on in the lyrics and the music, and all credit to him. I mean, we didn't have any part in that concept. He went out and rented a suit of armor, and he had a friend of his do all the posing. And I mean, he was very meticulous with it. I think it's really cool. I think he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he did an amazing job.
So the album title, Waves of Loss and Power, any kind of theme behind that? What was the theme and the idea behind the title of the record?
It just seemed when I was working on the lyrics that, and life is cyclical. You have times in your life where you feel empowered, you feel like you can take on the world and do anything you aspire to. And there are other times where you suffer terrible losses and you feel like you're never going to climb out of that hole. And it's like waves. I mean, these things come and go throughout life. And the drama in the music and what was coming out of me lyrically seemed to all sort of fit that theme.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where the title came from, I think.
All right. Well, I got to tell you, so this is available, just so you guys know. Obviously, Laser's Edge, you can pre-order it. You can pre-order the CD, and you can pre-order high-resolution digital audio files, which most bands don't do that. But, audio, you have a lot of audio files in the prog, rock, and metal world. There's a lot of guys like that. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. And it comes out, when does it come out again? Let everybody know.
March 10th.
March 10th. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to see how people respond to it, because, when I started, the memory just as soon as I saw, like I said, as soon as I saw the band name in my email, I immediately clicked on it because I remember the band. And I would always wonder every once in a while, like I would go through a lot of these bands that, I'd listen to music, like, whatever happened to this band? Whatever happened to these guys?
Yeah.
So, and then,
yeah, we're one of those for sure.
And it's like the Chinese democracy of prog metal albums, right? Like it's like 20 years later.
When you said you were clicking on it, were you trying to open the file or delete it?
Well, I was trying to click on it, but the difference is the album's actually good, as opposed to, it was definitely not disappointing.
Thank you.
Because then, you run into a situation when bands are gone a long time, you always run into, for whatever reason, the expectations always go up. Right. And I've seen that with bands. The Chinese democracy, comment is that, what happens is people get these high expectations, and, I don't ever have expectations because you never know what a band's going to do. I'm not judging you by, I want to see what you're going to do. I don't have this preconceived notion, this has to be this, or I don't have these lofty expectations, or I don't have low ones. And, I was really, it was one of those things where I was like, I listened to it and I'm like, yep, this is exactly what I probably would have expected. And it ended up being pretty good. So I'm pretty excited for you guys to be back. And it's
thanks, man. We're excited too, and thank you so
really
much
cool.
again for
it is
for
really
kind
cool.
words.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I have another question for you. Do you guys have any material for another record?
We have some. Yes, not all the songs that we wrote in those 2 years went into the album. We have a few songs that we didn't put in. And as a matter of fact, Josh and I were having the conversation the other day that we're like itching to start writing again. It's that creative writing that is missing. So we're like, we should start writing again and start, but right now I think the first thing we got to do is just, we really have to come through for the live in Prague Power. And we really have to put our focus on that. I mean, we haven't been playing live in the last 22 years, right? So the last time we played live was in Europe, on a small tour in Europe in 2004.
2004, yeah. So yeah, it's almost.
So it really is like a long time since we played live. I mean, we've been together and we've been practicing and writing together, but it's not the same thing.
Right.
We were back when we were Ice Age. We used to, like, our performances, we were so meticulous. We wanted to have an 100% replication of what we played on CD. I mean, that's the standard we set for every one of us. And if there was one note that was played differently, we would I would sit there and discuss it afterwards and say, I played that note differently this time, and I would be disappointed. That's what we were, right? And that's 20 years ago. And then now we're different people. So we have to see what is it from this album that comes out live. And how do we get it across?
Yeah, we have to think about a set list too, because people, they want to hear some of the old stuff, and we want to play the new stuff, and so those are decisions we have to make too. But I know that as far as new material, I can tell you right now, when we start rehearsing for the live shows, we're going to sneak in some writing in those sessions too, as well. I don't think we can help it,
Yeah, we can't help it. Yeah, sorry.
it's like the biggest challenge. How do I play as many songs as I can with the allotted time being a prog band? It's like one of the biggest challenges you got to think about too. Set time. Some prog bands you could fill up a whole set with 2 songs. It's just the way that happens.
We have an hour set for a prog, right? For the Prog Power show, I think it's an hour.
Yeah, it's an hour set.
2 of the songs on this album are 15 minutes each. So it's going to be interesting what we decide to play.
Yeah, we got big decisions here.
I don't know if I should bring this up, but this was a funny story at this point. But I think when we played a show.
I know you're going.
Oh, Power Man!
I'm not going to say Power Man in Baltimore. We played a show, and then we were on the set, and we are like almost done with our set, and then the promoter comes on stage. She goes, "Oh, the next band is not ready. You have another song to play?" And we're like, "Yeah, we do." And the next song was 15 minutes, and he was like, "Wow, you still playing?" I said, "Sorry, it's the only song we have is 15 minutes long."
You said play another song. You didn't say, the only song we had ready to go was, I think it was Ice Age from The Great Divide.
It was Ice Age.
And what happened was my pedal broke right before that. So it was an extended 5 minutes added to that.
Yeah.
I was trying to fix my pedal before I played the song. Yeah, that was...
Al fixing his pedal was part of the performance art of the...
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Well, the best thing about that is he can fix his pedal. You guys can keep playing the song, and it'll sound like the song was meant to be played that way.
Exactly.
Because good point.
Because when you're in a prog band, you could sit there and you could pretty much play just keep playing and jamming because people expect that.
Yeah,
we tuned up for 5 minutes. It would have been great.
Yeah, we meant to do this.
Yes, everything is done on purpose.
I sang in a prog band. I remember one time, I can't remember what it was, but the transmitter on the guitar player's guitar went out, and all there was bass and drums. I just kept singing, and people thought it was normal. And
it's an acapella part, right?
Right, correct. And it was only for I don't know, 30 seconds. But people thought it was a normal thing. Nobody even noticed. And like when you're prog bands, you can just keep going. Hey, you know what? I'll just keep playing, and it looks normal. Maybe they planned that part for him to have a break. It's just how it happens.
We had the guitar rig blow up on one of our flash bombs and start a show. Remember that?
Yeah,
we had flash bombs during a show one time, and the bomb went off, and Jim's guitar rig went out.
Well, yeah, because we didn't know the light guy ran out of sockets, and then he plugged his bombs into my rack back there. So that overloaded the rack. Yeah.
Oh,
and as I'm playing, my sound goes out.
First song.
No one noticed because it was meant to be that way.
The good old days.
Yes.
So, I've seen it. I know a band that had all their stuff held up in customs. They came here and they had to rent everything, and they were playing guitars that, the necks were starting to bow out on them, and you couldn't even tune them right, but they just played anyway, and I think nobody noticed, which is kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, it's a testament to their talent.
Well, nobody noticed, but it was pretty funny, actually. And I didn't. And the thing is, I didn't find out about this until 20 some years later, when one of the guys in the band told me. So that was kind of funny.
Cool.
So I've seen crazy stuff like that. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to tell you what. I appreciate you coming on the show. It is definitely long overdue for this record. I really like the album quite a bit. And
thanks, man. Thanks for having us. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but thank you so much for supporting the band and for your kind words about the new album and making it album of the month and all that. It's really gratifying, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was pretty easy to make it album of the month, to be honest with you. And what I think is interesting is I don't have any predetermined, I'm going to make this record specifically. I've never catered that kind of stuff to what a label wants me to do or whatever. I don't really bow down to that kind of stuff. There's people that'll do that. I've never done that. If I like it, it's going to go there. It is what it is. And, I just, I have probably 30 records that have been sent to me, and I really felt that this album was the strongest one out of all of those, and to be able to put it up there. And that's really where where I come from on that.
Man,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you.
you, man.
Wow.
So much, man. It means a
Yeah,
lot.
It means a lot.